The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass. And it feels like it's been many ages since last we had the opportunity to see and enjoy the Wheel of Time on our televisions. In fact, Season 1 debuted on November 19th, 2021. So it's been almost 2 years since the debut of the series. But we now have a release date for Season 2, which is September 1st. Very, very exciting. And most recently, we even got our first full trailer for this upcoming season, and I cannot be more excited, and therefore, I want to talk about it. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Pop Docs channel. My name is Joseph. I am one half of the Pop Docs here with a reaction video specifically, and this is an exciting one for me, getting to talk about, react to, and theorize about the trailer for the upcoming second season of The Wheel of Time. As my background may suggest, I am a huge fan of The Wheel of Time. It is undoubtedly, single-handedly my favorite book series of all time, let alone my favorite fantasy and to a certain degree science fiction book series of all time. And so I was elated beyond definition, beyond expression, when I heard that Amazon was producing The Wheel of Time in a live action television format. And I really enjoyed the first season. There were some drawbacks, there were some critiques that myself and others have had about the first season. I still am right around a 6.5 out of 10 for my overall rating of the first season. But I really enjoyed it, and I think it really did a good job setting the groundwork for this world, for many of the characters, and creating the hooks for both readers and new members to the world of the Wheel of Time for subsequent seasons. And I think, as we'll get into here in a few moments, talking about this particular trailer, that we're really going to be expanding on this world and really seeing these characters fleshed out a little bit more and on new journeys. And I am very excited to see where the creatives take this particular season. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the trailer and see what is potentially on offer. But before doing so, one quick caveat. As I mentioned, I do want to give some of my theories that are propelled by the footage that we have been given in this particular trailer. And so there will be spoilers for both the first season of The Wheel of Time, as well as for certain books at the beginning of the Wheel of Time series, as this season is purported to largely be an amalgamation, a bringing together, a mashup of what is my favorite book in the whole series, The Great Hunt, the second book in the series, and then The Dragon Reborn, the third book in the series. So, with that spoiler warning now offered, let's jump into the trailer. Okay, we got the trailer pulled up and we are off and running. We start here with a shot of Moiraine in what appears to be Carienne. From a lot of the promotional materials, some interviews with Rafe Judkins, we know Carienne is going to be one of the new cities that we're going to discover in Season 2 of The Wheel of Time. And I'm so excited to see how the writing staff, the creatives, open up this world. I did feel as though we were a little bit insulated and only saw a handful of locations in the first season. I think that certainly fit the narrative that was being told, that the characters were set on a journey, they had certain things they had to do in order to achieve the goals on their journey. And so that rapid pace that's limited to certain areas, certain locations, the general locations being the two rivers, really where the show started, several different smaller villages and towns and encampments that the pairs of characters and groups of characters encounter on their way to Tarvalon, where we also saw the White Tower, and then ultimately concluding in Shinar and the Eye of the World. I'm really hoping in this season we're going to see a lot more of the world, both in terms of different environments that exist, certainly different cities that exist and the cultures in these different cities. And certainly I think that the two main pillars of that world building effort in this season are going to be Carien as well as Falm. And I'm very excited to see how these different locations are depicted. And I hope that each new location we go to has its own feel, its own production design that makes it unique, and its own cultural influences that separate it from other areas in Robert Jordan's world. Because I think that is one of the main pillars that really strengthen the Wheel of Time series is this varied world, this multifaceted, multicultural world that Robert Jordan created and described so vividly. And I really hope that we see those elements captured more directly, more vividly in this upcoming season. I think, based upon this trailer, we're off to a good start, and I have a lot of hope that they are going to nail the landing in terms of the world building and really opening up the world in this particular season and moving far beyond and really expanding upon the foundation they laid in the first season. Also, I think Moiraine's and Lan's stories are going to be really interesting in this season. Mainly because I don't think there's a lot of narrative to mine in The Great Hunt and The Dragon Reborn. Certainly in The Great Hunt. If memory serves me well, Moiraine and Lan had essentially two scenes. They had a POV chapter, believed from Moraine's point of view, where they're researching different dynamics of the Dragon Reborn, the prophecies of the dragon, and then they were beset and attacked by some shadow spawn. And then they show up again after the Battle of Falm at the end of The Great Hunt. Much bigger role to play in The Dragon Reborn, where they are part of the group that is pursuing Rand as he is traveling to Tyr throughout the length of The Dragon Reborn. So there's much more page time on which Moiraine and Lan are doing things in The Dragon Reborn than The Great Hunt. But given the relative dearth of time, particularly in The Great Hunt, I wonder if in order to give Moiraine and Lan things to do in Season 2, the writers are going to come up with original storylines for both of these characters. I think it's a possibility, and I certainly imagine if they do come up with original storylines, they'll be inspired by everything that's happened in the book series. And so they might take inspiration from Moiraine and Lan's character arcs down the road in books 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc., and weave them into these original storylines. And certainly I think one component of that is going to be Moraine's efforts to try to address the block, the shield, the stilling, whatever it is that Ishamael, who the characters still think at this point is the Dark One, although for book readers we know that it's a Forsaken, Ishamael, placed upon Moiraine, thereby restricting her access to the One Power. And so certainly this, to the extent this is going to be included in this season, is going to be an original storyline. And to the degree to which the original storyline makes sense organically, is effectively told, I think is really going to have a big impact on the success of this particular season, given the prominent role that Moiraine and Lan play in the television adaptation of The Wheel of Time up to this point. I also think, and this trailer seems to bear out this theory that fans have, we're going to get flashbacks. And this is going to be another way to give more screen time, more narrative time to Moiraine in particular, but certainly can also weave in Lan to flashbacks. And I think one of the flashbacks we are going to get is going to be the proclamation that Moiraine and Swan hear of the dragon being reborn, which then certainly launches them on their quest to find the Dragon Reborn and advise the Dragon Reborn in the Dragon Reborn's efforts to save the world. And so I think that's going to be a main crux of flashbacks we're going to get, featuring Moiraine in particular. Either way, I'm very excited to see Moraine's journey. And what I'm hoping, and this is one of my big theories that I'm really hoping to see in this season, is that because this is a mashup and amalgamation of The Great Hunt and The Dragon Reborn, we might actually get the culmination of Moraine's storyline in The Dragon Reborn when she uses Balefire against the Forsaken, against Balal, and thereby saving Rand, and importing that into the end of this particular season so that that actually occurs in Falm. And I think that might actually work pretty well if that was a direction they were going, because if they are going to have this story arc throughout the season for Moiraine where she's trying to undo the shield, the block, the stealing, whatever it might be, thereby allowing her near the end of the season to regain access to the One Power and using that newly found, reestablished access to defeat one of the Forsaken in the Battle of Falm. I think that really makes narrative sense, or it can make narrative sense with those different components. And I also really thought that was a cool scene in The Dragon Reborn. Certainly, in my view, the ending of The Dragon Reborn, the best series of scenes, the best part of that story. And so if we're going to merge some of these things because we're mashing together these two books, I think that is one way to really give Moiraine a great scene at the end of this season. So that's my theory. I'm hoping that we're going to see that at the conclusion of this season. But let's continue on with this trailer. A couple points I want to note about the White Tower. I think the White Tower's design, it all looks great. Very reminiscent of the maps in the book series. One of my nitpicks about the time we spent in the White Tower in particular in the first season, and we spent about 2 episodes, maybe a little more than 2 episodes in the White Tower, and it just felt very small in the interior. Certainly the landscape shots, the exterior shots, make it look very grand, very vast, very epic. But once we were actually inside the White Tower, and this certainly could have been due to budget constraints and maybe some complications with COVID as well, but it really seemed like the White Tower was made up of a couple hallways, a few rooms, the Hall of the Sitters, and that was about it. And that the only people actually living in the White Tower, working in the White Tower, inhabiting the White Tower, were the Aes Sedai and the warders that we met on the road to Tar Valon. And so in both the architecture, the space, the environment, as well as the people, the White Tower to me felt very insulated and very small in the first season. And so I hope that in this particular season, the time that we do spend in the White Tower, which is going to be, I think, a considerable amount of time, particularly in the early episodes, because it looks as though Nynaeve and Egwene are going to begin their training in the White Tower, where they will meet Elaine. And then I think we're also going to get flashbacks to the White Tower. And I hope this is going to be one way for the show and the creators to really open up the White Tower and show the grandiose nature of it, raise the epic quotient for the White Tower. And so that's one of my hopes that we will see in this upcoming season. But let's keep moving forward with the trailer. Here's this gorgeous shot of the White Tower. We then have Moiraine in a bathtub. I think the last time we saw her in a bathtub was in the pilot episode, although she met with Megan in a spa bathhouse in Tar Valon, where Megan said that she was going to go to the west to investigate ships. We now have a shot of Rand in some desert locale. I think, as many fans have suggested, and I would agree with them then, that this is going to be a dream. There's a couple shots that look like they take place in the same area. And so I don't dissent from that view that these shots are in Tel'aran'rhiod, that these are dreams. And I think it's really cool that the creators, the writers, did not shy away from the world of dreams and incorporating that into the show. I think going from the written word into this medium, it could be very difficult to adapt the world of dreams. It's very complicated in a lot of ways, sometimes convoluted, very esoteric, very abstract at the same time. And so I think it's a daunting task to really adapt that well and explain to non-readers what is going on, the rules of this world. And so far, I think they've done a good job. They introduced it in a good way, I think, in the first season. I hope, just like with expanding the world building, expanding what we see and get to know about the White Tower, I hope we also see an expansion in this season of Tel'aran'rhiod, of the world of dreams, and what's going on there, and who can access it, and what they can do when they access it. So, very excited to the degree that this is a reflection that we are going to get more in the world of dreams. One last point as well that I wanted to mention with this particular shot is Rand has new threads. One of my nitpicks from the first season was everyone seemed to have the same costume, the same outfit. No matter how much time passed, no matter how many leagues they traveled in this world, they all seem to have the same clothes. And there was very little variation in the wardrobe. And to me, that just kind of made the show feel both cheap and unrealistic. I'm glad to see that we seem to have characters getting new wardrobes, getting new threads for this season. Looking forward to that dynamic. Another shot of Moiraine seemingly confronted by a Myrddraal, and then what I imagine is also taking place inside the World of Dreams, a Shamael disintegrating and disappearing. And before moving on to Egwene, I think one of the things that we're going to see in this particular season is a Shamael utilizing the World of Dreams to torment Rand, to frustrate Rand, and also set him on his path throughout this whole season, which we saw in different ways with different characters in The Great Hunt and The Dragon Reborn as well, and the way that the Forsaken and the operatives, the agents of the Dark One, utilized dreams to torment Rand. And so I think we're going to see those elements in this particular season and really have a Shamael being the driving force behind those particular dreams that beset Rand. But moving on, it's great to see, I think, a new location. So already, hopefully some vindication for my hope that we're going to see more of the White Tower. I assume that this is taking place in the White Tower somewhere. It's Egwene working on her channeling under seemingly the tutelage of Liandrin, which I think is a really interesting choice, but I think it makes a lot of sense because I assume that we are going to see the storyline play out where Liandrin does betray Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine to the Seanchan. And so I think creating this link early on in the season between Liandrin and the different accepted and the different novices, Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine, is going to give more narrative weight and emotional weight to the eventual betrayal that befalls Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine at the hands of Liandrin. So I really like this idea that Liandrin has a key role to play in their training, in presumably the accepted test, as we'll see here soon with Nynaeve. And I think it's a great direction to go narratively for this particular season. And so let's keep moving on here through the trailer. We have what appears to be the Dark Friend Social, one of the coolest scenes in all the Wheel Time series. Such a great prologue to open up the Great Hunt. And so I'm glad to see that they are adapting that scene in their own particular way. A nitpick is that if this is the Dark Friend Social, my headcanon when I was reading the books had this as a huge almost party for these characters that a Shamael would then enter and then give each of them their relative assignments. This seems much more subdued, much more insular, much smaller than I imagined, and I think the way this is described on the page, but it's understandable moving from that medium to this visual medium. Either way, I'm so glad that we're getting this. I love the fact that everyone at the table seems to be wearing different articles of clothing, and so just like in the book where we could pick out maybe a white cloak, an Aes Sedai, a Shannarian warrior, what have you, based upon some of what was visible in terms of each character's wardrobe, we didn't know who was who, and so we had this long-running mystery throughout those early books as to who was involved in this particular meeting of Dark Friends and who were those lurking agents of the Dark One that might try and beset and attack our heroes in the book. And I think they're going to continue that kind of mystery throughout this season. I imagine, as many have in the community, that this is going to be the opening scene for the first episode of season 2, the cold open for that episode in this season. I think if it is, I think that's a great way to launch into the season. And it appears we have a Shamael over here overseeing the meeting. Just parenthetically, I am so glad that Ferris, the actor playing Shamael, seems to have a more involved role throughout this season. He was wonderful, and I thought he was a highlight of the 8th episode in season 1. Loved his portrayal of a Shamael, and I'm very excited that he's back and that we seem to be getting more of him in this season. So, quick shot of Nynaeve talking to, it looks like, Alana, that then moves back into a great shot of a Shamael seemingly wielding the One Power. And, like I said, I'm very excited to see where his story goes this season. It appears he is here extracting, rescuing, helping, presumably Lanfear, from emerging out of the Dark One's prison after the events at the Eye of the World, the breaking of the seal, what presumably is going to then open up the Dark One's prison and release the Forsaken back into the world. And I am very excited for the opportunity the TV adaptation has, because my own reading of the Wheel Time book series is that the Forsaken are talked about as being more formidable, more terrifying than they actually end up being in the actual narrative. And certainly that's going to vary across the different Forsaken in the books. I think there are certain Forsaken that are much more formidable and terrifying than many others. Some of them, for those that have read the series, just pop in for a few pages, are defeated, and then we don't hear from them again. Bilal being an example of that in The Dragon Reborn. And so I think this is a real opportunity that the television adaptation has to really expand the role of the Forsaken and make them the terrifying force that they are reputed to be in this world. And I think that there's been a good start to that with Shamael's portrayal in season 1. We have Damane attacking Shannarans here. So this is a scene seemingly where the Shannara group with Perrin seemingly chasing the Horn of Valir on the hunt for the Horn, coming into contact with the Seanchan and probably losing to the Seanchan. And kind of pick up off of my last point about the Forsaken in the books, I have always felt the Seanchan were the real villains, outside of certainly the metaphysical elements, the Dark One, who's always out there lurking throughout the Wheel of Time, is the ultimate foil antagonist villain for Rand, in particular the Dragon Reborn. But really, throughout the book series, I think the most formidable, most terrifying antagonists in general were the Seanchan. And so I think so far, both in terms of how they arrived in the first season, as well as what we've seen in the promotional materials and certainly in this trailer, I think they're leaning into that characterization of the Seanchan, really raising the stakes for everybody when they come in contact with the Seanchan. So I think they are going to be the main antagonistic force in this season and the most terrifying elements of this particular season that confront our heroes. But here we have a scene of Nynaeve entering what looks to be the chamber where the arches for the accepted test are, and she is about to undergo the accepted test, presumably. In the background, looks like we have Liandrin, Sheriam, and then a mystery Aes Sedai. I'm not sure who is in the middle there of the three Aes Sedai that are going to proctor the accepted test, facilitate the accepted test. So once again, Liandrin seemingly involved in each of the stories for Nynaeve, Egwene, presumably Elaine. We don't get too much Elaine in this particular trailer. But I think, again, that's a good approach, having her involved in each of these storylines to add that narrative weight, that emotional weight of the betrayal. I also want to mention, I am really excited to see an accepted test, but certainly Nynaeve's accepted test. Of the two we saw in the books, Nynaeve and Egwene, I always thought Nynaeve's accepted test was far more interesting and fascinating. And so if they are only going to depict and show one accepted test in the television adaptation, given budget constraints, time constraints, narrative constraints, I'm glad that it's going to be Nynaeve's accepted test that we are seemingly going to see on screen in this upcoming season. They have an exterior shot, an environmental shot of people on horseback. Presumably this is Perrin and the Shannarans on the hunt for the Horn. One of the things I'm really interested to see is how they kickstart the season. Is there going to be a time jump, as some have suggested? And I could definitely see that. I think there's evidence in this trailer that we are going to get some kind of time jump. It'd be really interesting to see how they do that, because it would seem to me that given the stakes of having the Horn of Valir in the hands of the Dark One's agents is really an existential crisis for the world, certainly for our principal characters. And so if the time jump is somewhere at the outset of the season, and there is a period of time where they are not chasing Padden Fane and the Horn, that seems very strange to me. Other than the one way I've thought about that they might come up and explain something like that, if that's the route that the writers take, is that perhaps Padden Fane just disappears without a trace following the battle at Faldara. And then sometime, maybe a month later, 2 months later, word comes back to the Shannarans, to Perrin, somebody relevant to our cast, that Padden Fane has been seen, and so that then launches the hunt for the Horn. Either way, it's going to be really interesting. I think they have to be very delicate if they are going to utilize some kind of time jump to have it make sense in the story for our characters. And this is, I think, evidence of some kind of time jump, because here we have Selene Lanfear embracing Rand, Rand seemingly reciprocating the embrace with Selene or Lanfear. And this certainly seems like an embrace that is part of a relationship that has been going on for a little while. This doesn't look like they just met yesterday. And so I do think this is evidence that there's been some kind of time jump in the story, probably at the outset of the story. So I think it'll be interesting again to see how the writers approach this aspect of the story in the beginning of the season. One of the things I'm loving about each shot of Rand that we've gotten in the promotional materials and the trailer is he seems imbued with a confidence and a swagger. And it looks like he's really accepted the mantle of being the Dragon Reborn. And I'm really excited to see how that translates into his character arc throughout this season and certainly going forward through subsequent seasons. And I think this particular sequence of Rand seemingly walking toward the throne room to have a conversation with Swan that we see at the end of the trailer, I think really demonstrates that confidence, really he exudes that confidence, expresses that confidence. And so I'm excited to see this iteration of Rand, the Rand who seemingly has accepted that he is the Dragon Reborn and everything that entails. The shot of Tar Valon, quick shot of Moiraine on horseback, seemingly being chased by someone. Lan and Moiraine seemingly having a conversation, a debate, an argument over their roles vis-a-vis the Dragon Reborn, and should they be advisors to the Dragon Reborn? What does that mean? It'll be interesting to really see this dynamic between Moiraine and Lan and how long that the bond is masked. As we find out at the end of Season 1, because Moiraine is shielded or stilled, the mask that she placed on the bond apparently did not get removed, and she can't remove it until she can access the One Power again. And how is that going to have an effect on the relationship between Moiraine and Lan? Again, I think going into the season, these two characters, their story arcs, their relationship is the biggest question mark for me. And I'm really fascinated to see where they go with it. A shot of Swan and talking about how he cannot be controlled. Certainly, I think the likelihood is that this is a conversation with at least Moiraine, maybe even Varian, who he knows in this season, and talking about Rand, the Dragon Reborn. I do think there is a decent chance, though, that this is a scene between the Amyrlin Seat and the Dragon Reborn, between Swan and Rand, with Rand essentially asking to have Logain follow him, come with him, teach him how to wield the One Power, what it means to be the Dragon Reborn as Logain has thought about it, contemplated it. I think the mechanics may or may not work. I'm not sure if a gentled channeler can actually teach another channeler how to use the One Power. And so there might be a mechanical issue with that if that is what this scene is depicting here. But if it is depicting that, I think it's awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about why I think it's awesome to have Logain potentially be that mentor, that Osmodian type of character for Rand in the series. But here we have a demonstration of the variation of the weaves. It's awesome that they are adding variation in the weaves, particularly in terms of the color, and how that's going to correspond with different types of weaves and outcomes of channeling. Looks great, in my view. Another shot of Perrin, seemingly really leaning into his wolf side. Maybe this is Hopper. We might get a Hopper sighting here. But expanding on his character, I think, is really important for this season because he didn't have a whole lot to do in the first season. This scene between Rand and Moiraine, for jumping to Egwene here as a Damane, I wonder if that's going to be an echo of some of the scenes in The Dragon Reborn, where Rand is off on his own, but he's beset by these dreams where the Forsaken are just tormenting him and frustrating him. And he, in some of those scenes, mistakes his actual friends who are also in the dream and encounter him for agents of the Dark One, and then attacks them because of that paranoia. And I wonder if that's what this scene is an echo of, that he thinks he's dreaming, but Moiraine is actually there, and he believes, though, that she is actually an apparition, that has been created by Ishamael or other agents of the Dark One to torment him. And he ultimately, presumably, finds out and reconnects with Moiraine and Lan, as we saw in the sizzle reel from a while ago. The three of them seem to be on a journey together at some point in this season. We also have a shot of Egwene as a Damane, and so they're keeping that storyline from the Great Hunt in this particular season. And once again, this is really raising the stakes of the threat the Seanchan pose to our characters, our heroes, as well as the whole world of the Wheel of Time. And certainly this is, in many ways, a formative step in Egwene's story and character arc. A quick shot of Nynaeve, presumably in the midst of the accepted test. Our new Matt, Donald Finn, who is seemingly being tormented with at least the appearance of the ruby-hilted dagger. In the background, it kind of looks like it's got trappings of the room where the Dark Friend social took place, although I think the fireplaces are a little taller than they are in that earlier shot. Either way, I'm really excited to see Donald Finn take over the role of Matt. I love Barney Harris. I was sad to see him leave the project, but from everything the cast has been saying and the creators have been saying, Donald Finn is doing a great job jumping into the shoes of Matrim Cawthon. One nitpick, it looks like he's still wearing the rags from season 1, and for the love of God, can someone get Matt some new clothes? Hopefully, by the end of the season, he will have new clothes. That's one of my other goals and my hopes for this season. Rand channeling again with Celine Lanfear in the background. And then my favorite shot, the most intriguing shot in my view of this whole trailer, is a conversation that appears to take place between Rand and Logain. Presumably this is in Carien. This is around the time that Rand meets with Swan. And so this is certainly, I think, evidence as to why maybe Rand is going to ask Swan to allow Logain to go with Rand to teach Rand how to wield the One Power. And if that's the case, anything that gets Logain more time, more screen time in the show, I am in favor of. He was one of my favorite characters from the first season. The Dragon Reborn episode, the 4th episode, hands down my favorite episode of season 1. And so any way that the writers can bring in Logain and make it make organic sense, narrative sense, I am all in favor of that approach. And so I'm really hoping that Logain takes on some kind of mentor role, even though it does look like in this shot he still is beset, afflicted by the madness brought on by his own ability to channel in the first season. Either way, this has got me really excited for the dynamic between these two characters and to see where that potentially goes in the season. Again, great shot of the Seanchan and the threat that they pose going through the countryside and subduing different towns, different villages. And here we have presumably High Lady Soroth, her voice, and Ishamael on this giant palanquin overlooking this crowd. And again, I love this idea that Ishamael is having a more direct involvement in what's going on in the world, rather than staying back in the shadows and manipulating things from the shadows. It appears like he's going to have a direct effect. He's going to be directly involved in what's going on and seemingly manipulating different forces, different elements, different characters in this world to achieve his own particular ends, the ends of the Dark One. And so I love this shot of the three of them at the top of this palanquin and to see where this is going to go in the season, potentially even throughout future seasons. Here we have Turok, who is opening the chest with the Horn of Valyr and declaring that the Horn of Valyr is going to be the key to taking over the world. He was a great character for just the little time that he had in the Great Hunt, so it's great to see him on the screen. Looks like a great antagonist for presumably Rand, as we'll see here in a few shots. So I love that he's in it. This is clearly following the betrayal of Liandrin of Egwene and Nynaeve, Lan to the Seanchan, leading to Egwene being captured. Then we have a quick cut to an explosion of the One Power from Nynaeve, probably during the accepted test. And there she is. And that then merges into a scene of men on horseback, likely white cloaks, I think, charging towards Falm and mirroring what happens at the end of the Great Hunt. Liandrin, we've seen this room before. This is where the Aes Sedai rings are melted, and potentially she's melting some ring here. We're not quite sure. But she's probably up to no good, up to nefarious ends. And here, Some quick shots. I wanted to mention here, I think this is a flashback. Siuan certainly does not look like she is any kind of Amerlin regalia. She looks like she's a member of the Blue Aja at this point. They both look to be members of the Blue Aja. And so I think that this is going to take place, another theory, mine involving Moiraine, but just before they hear the proclamation that the dragon has been reborn on the slopes of Dragonmount, thereby launching them into their years-long quest to find the Dragon Reborn and help the Dragon Reborn. And so I think that is going to be the focal point of the flashbacks we get with Moiraine and Siuan in the White Tower, is all leading up to that moment where they hear the dragon has been reborn. Some shots of Egwene and Nynaeve, as we then go back into a sequence of Nynaeve and the accepted test, Egwene talking to Elaine about her friends being in trouble. Can't wait to see Elaine's character in this season. And before going on, that reminds me of another thing. We don't see any Min in this trailer. And I don't believe we've seen any Min in any of the promotional materials before the trailer. So I'm wondering if Min is going to be in this season. The last we saw of Min, she was leaving Shinar, leaving Faldera, just before the Trollocs attacked Faldera. And so presumably on her way back to Tar Valon from the city from which she came. But we haven't seen her yet. I certainly hope that she's in this season. She's one of my favorite characters from the book series. And I thought Kay Alexander played her wonderfully in the first season. So I'm really hoping that she is going to be in this season alongside these new characters that we've been waiting for to join the cast and join the show, including Avienda. And so here is Avienda putting up her veil and going into battle with White Cloaks, with Perrin looking on. This certainly seems to be the scene in The Dragon Reborn in which Perrin frees Gaul, and then Gaul and Perrin then fight and kill a bunch of White Cloaks. And it seems like here they have that scene, but they have Avienda in the role of Gaul. Presumably, if that is the case, Perrin is going to rescue Avienda. Together, they are then going to defeat these White Cloaks. And then ultimately, this seems like this is going to bring the Aiel fully into the story, into the narrative. And they appear to even be involved in the Battle of Fam, which I think is really going to be an awesome choice. The best fight scene in the first season was the cold open of the Battle of the Blood Snow. And so if we see those types of action scenes, particularly involving, surrounding, centered on the Aiel, I think the action is going to be awesome in this season. And I think it makes sense, certainly in the kind of condensed timeline that the writers are working with in terms of adapting the Wheel Time series. Bringing the Aiel in now makes a lot of sense. And doing it through Avienda also seems to me to make sense. I just hope that since we have Bane and Chiad already announced in this part of the cast, we are going to get a Gaul, whether that's in this particular season or in the next season. I certainly think, given Gaul's relationship in the books to Perrin and Perrin's seeming storyline in season 3, which we imagine is going to follow his Shadow Rising storyline, I still think it makes sense to bring in Gaul at that point if Gaul's not in this season. Excited to see more of the Aiel in this season. Lan getting some action. Hopefully has a lot more to do because he didn't have a lot to do in episode 8 of last season. So hopefully the writers correct that because Daniel Henney is wonderful. Here is a shot of Leandrin, presumably meeting that person that was referenced in the first season, trying to hide her appearance, her identity as she does so. Got a very contemplative, shirtless Rand looking out a window, thinking about life, thinking about what he's doing, where he's going, probably where his friends are. Contemplative Rand. And then we have a series of quick shots of our various characters, some in the real world, some I think are in Tel'aran'rhiod, the World of Dreams. And then this awesome shot of Rand seemingly in Falme, seemingly staring down and confronting the Seanchan, in particular Turok. And in his Jedi phase, Jedi Rand, Jedi Dragon has arrived. And his midi-chlorian count is off the charts. He's ready for battle. And we get a quick shot here of Turok looking great in the armor, as I mentioned. Looking formidable, looking fierce, as a Blade Master should. And I am hoping that we get an awesome sword fight between Turok and Rand, mirroring the sword fight that we get in The Great Hunt. I don't know how in the world he fights with those nails, but it appears that he's going to fight with them. He did not take them off before drawing his sword, as far as I can tell. And so he's going to have to not only be dodging Rand's sword, but presumably trying not to poke himself in the eye with those nails. But that's, I think, going to be an awesome scene near the tail end of the upcoming season. And then several quick cuts of various characters, explosions, stabbings, boom, 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 bang, bang, boom, bang, one power use, into the shot of Rand in front of, talking to, confronting, conversing with the Amyrlin seat. Presumably, fans have pointed out this is likely in Carien, in the throne room there in Carien. And the Amyrlin informing Rand that he is far more than just a spoke in the wheel. He is the force propelling the wheel. And once again, Rand looks like he's got that confidence, that swagger that I mentioned earlier. And I think it's a great way to take his character, even though it is still pretty early on in the series. And there we go, confirmation once again. So we know that we are not in Teleron Real, that it's not a dream. This is coming out on September 1st, only a few weeks away, and cannot be more excited for it. But those are my thoughts, my reaction to everything we saw in the trailer. It's also overlaid with what we've gotten so far with marketing materials, interviews, and the like. I think this is going to be a really fun, exciting, sad, tragic, emotional season. I think it's going to be bigger, more grandiose than season 1. And I am just really excited to see it, even though I was a little more tepid on the overall outcome of season 1. I think this one's going to be much improved on a whole host of dimensions. And I think just as they did in the first season, elevating material that may not have been the height of writing, the actors are going to bring it once again. They were the high point in season 1 for me. Everyone was well casted. Everyone was a great actor. They all brought their A game, I thought, throughout the first season. This trailer looks like they haven't lost a step. They're back. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing what they do with the Great Hunt, with the Dragon Reborn in this upcoming season. If you've seen the trailer, if you've read the books, if you haven't read the books and you decide to listen to a spoiler discussion, let me know in the comments below what you think about the upcoming season. Do you agree with my theories that I've offered here? Do you have your own theories? Did you have theories that were disproved by this trailer? Did you have theories that were bolstered by this trailer? Or do you have new theories based upon what we saw in this trailer? Either way, whether or not our theories hold up or fall by the wayside, I think we're all in for a very fun ride for season 2 of The Wheel of Time, and I cannot wait. If you like talking about, discussing, analyzing, theorizing about popular culture and all of its manifestations, please think about subscribing to this channel, liking this video, and checking out some of our other content that we've put together. We have book reviews, rankings, podcasts, all about popular culture in its different manifestations. But for this video, the Pop Docs Clinic is officially closed.